Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give a talk on the persecution of the Christian church across the globe.
I've been asked what is an example of the violence that I'm talking about. For 18 years in South Sudan, Muslim jihadis waged a war against my brothers and sisters.
Really, nigga?
What is this loser talking about?
Please, I don't have any time for any gossip now. Eh? Yes.
Look at him.
The double standards and hypocrisy with these Christian extremists is unbelievable. They want to talk about Sudan or Nigeria, but they are silent when it comes to these matters. Let's have a look.
There have now been 372 mass shootings in the United States of America in the last 365 days. Therefore, more than once a day, there are individuals, usually single or small groups of people, who are massacring large numbers of people. In the wake of this latest atrocity in Orlando, in the LGBT club there, we don't yet know whether this was a lone deranged gunman or an act of terrorism. I suppose that will in part depend on what colour they are and what religious faith they profess to follow.
Mass shootings. Over the past few years, they have become as regular in America as Star Wars movies. And just like Star Wars movies, people have started paying less and less attention. But this weekend, something happened.
The nation mourns the victims of 2 shooting massacres just 13 hours apart. The massacres in El Paso, Texas and Dayton, Ohio happened in startling proximity for a country already too familiar with gun violence. 29 people were killed in the 2 shooting rampages just 13 hours apart.
Yes, in the span of 2 days, 13 hours in fact, 84 people were shot, and currently 31 people have been killed in 2 deadly mass shootings. And even though most of America has gotten used to dealing with mass shootings, having them happen back to back has forced people to take notice. In fact, this weekend's tragedies garnered so much attention that President Trump couldn't respond with his usual sad tweet. Instead, he had to come out and give a formal address to the nation this morning where he condemned white supremacy and domestic terrorism. Most of these shooters are young white men.
But most of these shooters are young white men.
The 21-year-old white male said the attack was in response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas, adding that his ideology predates President Trump.
Mental health is a large contributor to any type of violence or shooting violence.
There's so many different factors you don't know. I mean, maybe a child's born with, something, mental illness.
This was a sick person. The person in Dayton was a sick person. No politician is to blame for that. You cannot be a white supremacist and be normal in the head. These are sick people.
Shirley and Ken, right now, police are still looking for the gunman responsible for this mass shooting overnight. In fact, Newscopter 7 over the scene right now in 5th Avenue and 139th Street. You can see that this park that's adjacent to the Harlem River Drive remains closed this morning. And this morning, police are releasing this photo of a gun, they say, was recovered from the scene after a Father's Day gathering turned deadly. Video from overnight shows the chaotic moments here at this scene. That shooting happening around 12:40 in the morning. The NYPD says 9 people were shot, including 7 men and 2 women, ranging in age from 21 to 42 years old. That includes a 21-year-old man who was shot and killed. Many of the victims were shot in the torso. There were also injuries to people's legs, back, and even fingers. A neighbor told me there were so many gunshots, she could not believe her ears.
And this is yet another incident of mass shooting that has been reported from the United States of America. This time, the shooting has been reported in the state of Maryland, where a shooter reportedly opened fire at a manufacturing unit in Smithsburg town. Now, according to the initial reports that have come in, at least about 3 people have been killed and a few others have been injured. The suspect and a police official are said to have been wounded in the shootout. Now, gun violence is, of course, becoming a common phenomenon across the United States of America, and it has been that way for many months and many years now. The country is still recovering from a series of devastating mass shootings which happened in a span of a month. Now remember, just recently there was this racist rampage that took place at a supermarket in Buffalo in New York, where 13 people were shot at, out of which 10 died. And this shooting in Buffalo, New York, predominantly targeted the black neighborhood. And then there was this mass shooting that took place at the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde in Texas. 19 children and 2 teachers were gunned down by a gunman. After that, a shooting took place inside of a medical building, inside a hospital, in fact, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where 4 people were killed. And finally, the last mass shooting took place at a parking lot at a church in Iowa, where 2 people were killed.
And as we've all heard by now, there wasn't just an armed resource officer on the scene. There was a whole platoon of police officers who responded to the shooting but didn't do shit to stop it while it was still going on. Yeah, and I'm willing to guess it's because they were also shit scared of a gunman armed with an AR-15. I feel like that's what we have to ask ourselves. As a society, do we want to live in a world where anyone can legally buy weapons that the police are scared of?
My biggest story of the year, to me, has to be the assault on Christians in this country, and we've alluded to it a little bit. This is pretty wild, Andrew, because it's particularly happening in Western Canada. You would think that Western Canada, of the whole country, would be the sort of least likely place where we would see these sort of sustained attacks on Christians. You know, if this was happening in another country, you would see conservative leaders, people like Jason Kenney, I hope people like Aaron O'Toole, speaking out against it. If we're seeing this happen in China or in somewhere in the Middle East, yeah, it's happening in Canada, and no one bats an eye at it. So and of course the media doesn't cover it. And then the sort of other story that had to do with Christians was the burning and desecration of dozens and dozens of churches across Canada in the summer. And, sometimes it was barely reported. It was reported as a local story, and none of it was ever tied together. We at True North, of course, took the opposite approach. We had a story called A Map of the Churches That Have Been Vandalized or Burned Since Residential School Story Announcement. We kept updating this piece as it came. At this point, there were 68 churches across the country that were either burnt to the ground or desecrated.
Now, we'd love to go inside Canada tonight, but we can't get there. It's like 1985 Albania. It's a closed country. So instead, we're speaking by satellite tonight to Ezra Levant with Rebel Media within Canada. He joins us now. Ezra, thanks so much for doing the show. What is going on in Canada? Serious. I mean, it's hard to believe what's happening in Canada. What is this?
Well, I'm reluctant to use the word Kristallnacht because we're not there yet. That was the night of the broken glass in pre-Holocaust Germany, where they smashed and burned and killed Jewish synagogues. It was a precursor to the Holocaust. Obviously, we are not that far gone yet. But what do you call it when literally dozens of churches are being systematically vandalized, torched? There was one fire in the BC interior that wiped out a whole village of 250 people, 2 people dead, and it is not yet determined who caused it, but it was in an area where other churches have been torched, so it may actually have its first victims. The crazy thing is this is so explicitly an anti-church hate crime wave, and yet Justin Trudeau, who is normally the first and the wokest, waited a week before saying anything, and he literally said, that's not the way to go. That was as tough as he got. He introduced an anti-hate crimes bill in Parliament that's targeting mean tweets and Facebook posts. But literally you have church after church being torched by Antifa-style terrorists, and he's almost silent on the matter, and his right-hand man finds it understandable. I think these are dark days for religious freedom in Canada.
Yeah, when they're burning churches and the head of the BC Civil Rights Commission says, burn it all down? I mean, that person sounds like a dangerous lunatic. Who is that? What is going on?
I'm not going to talk to you.
But why are you a liar?
I'm not going to talk to you.
Why are you a liar? Why are you a liar?
Any questions?
Shut up! Why are you a liar? You're a liar!
Ladies and
Answer
gentlemen.
the question! You're a liar!